I'll be one of the first people to say I really enjoy the classic sound of the TB-303 by Roland. That acid sound is so distinct. Because of that, it's so expensive to get. You can get replicas, you can spend money on all that, but I want to show ways to create this sound without having to do any of that at all. People might not call it authentic acid, but we're in a new age. Get with it. If you want that classic sound, go for it. Go and spend that money. I'd spend it if I could, but I also have found a bunch of ways to work around that and make acid pretty interesting despite not having any of these tools. Pretty much my narrow definition of acid goes by these three guidelines. It has to be a lead with one voice, and you can obviously pitch bend and even add fifths and all that, and I'll show that later. It has to have a filter to create a pluck, and that doesn't mean just low pass filter. It can also be a band pass filter, and it has to have knobs to change parameters like resonance, filter frequency, and pluck time, and I'll also get into that. I'm just gonna start with the basic acid patch here. Here I have Serum opened. This isn't the latest version of Serum, but you know how it is. At the very least, here's your acid patch, and you can just call it a day like that, but that's very boring, and it also doesn't really sound that much like acid. You can also try Serum's stupid little acid pluck thing, but that doesn't really sound too much like acid either. Also send this LFO to the master volume. So right now I have a really basic loop and patch here. I want to make things more interesting though. I already curved this off and I messed with the rate a little bit. The one thing you can do immediately is just macro this cutoff and do automations with this. So say just do this right here and maybe have this curve off and go up here, do some random shit here, and maybe go back down while it's doing all that. Do some funky shit here, just to show you. Already it sounds pretty interesting. Doesn't really sound like acid, but remember the goal here is just to make things sound, frankly, a little bit like acid. More interesting than classic acid, because we don't have classic acid patches right now, so why are we trying to replicate things that we don't have? Okay? Let's say you're too lazy to do any of this though. You can just, instead of that, you can go to your global matrix, go to chaos 1 or 2, and I'll show that in a bit, and just mess with the filter cutoff. Now that you have free time with that macro, you don't have to automate all that. You can also macro the rate here and get things that pluck longer or shorter. Now that I've done that, I'm realizing that the cutoff is a little bit too wide here, so maybe dial this chaos down a little bit. Pretty much you're getting down to the acid fundamentals here. All it really is knobs, and we're messing with knobs right now. You can change the MG to have a bit of a steeper cutoff point, maybe make that have a bit of a different timbre. That's pretty much close to the classic acid sound too. You can make the resonance higher, but then you'll start making little sine sweeps with it, and it sounds a bit weird. And you might want weird, but right now I don't want weird, so I'll dial that back a little bit.
Let's get into distortion.
Alright, so I have this patch here, and I want to do something with a bass line here, so here's how that sounds. That sounds nice, but I also want to try and add some distortion. Maybe I have this in a song where I want things to sound very harsh and intense, and I want to put a filter on it. Can also mess around with the distortions here. Then it starts sounding a bit less like acid. When this filter is going through this filter, you get two resonances kind of clashing with each other. That makes for some crazy sounds. You can also try and compress this so it doesn't sound too harsh, but you have to be careful because doing too much might cause a completely different sound. And there's your very basic acid. Just because I did this in Serum doesn't mean you can't do it anywhere else. In fact, just to show you, in Vital, probably easier in here, but sounds a bit different. So here I have a saw, put the filter on. This has a better randomization. You can mess with this as well. Maybe do sample and hold. Even with like I could spend time replicating the exact same parameters. The fact that the filter sounds different from this Serum filter makes a completely different sound, honestly. And that being going through distortion as well makes a different sound. So let's compare the two. You can see I've done this simple kick 2 patch, and unfortunately it doesn't have randomization mode, so you'll have to automate lengths here, and if you really wanted to, you can use this as a low pass filter. The problem is it's not exactly a low pass filter, so you're not cutting off frequencies. The way you can do this better is just throw a filter in here, and unfortunately I think with my version of Ableton the auto filter doesn't do plucks that well. Yeah, see, I don't understand why it's spending time going all the way back up. Maybe if I turn... Yeah, I don't even know. One way I can try and get around this is using EQ8. So here you can see you have more control here, but it just takes a lot longer to automate, so... And now let me automate the time and kick 2. Now that sounds very acid, but again, not like classic acid. Let's talk about effects. One classic way I can thicken up my acid is by adding just little details here, like some noise. Already that's starting to sound fat, but also remember that I'm working in the sub frequencies, so this might not work with higher pitches. I mean, it sounds alright, but I can also do sine erosion. Makes it sound very compressed, like it's going through a tracker. I can also do distortion outside of whatever I'm working in. So I can put an auto filter here and then maybe go through Melda Saturator. Or maybe even instead of a saturator, I can try and put it through an amp. Then you start sounding less like acid, but still interesting. Also, what I forgot to talk about with filters is, since every filter is different and reacts differently, try any filter you can. I know Kilohertz probably has a really good filter if I could afford it. Melda has a bandpass that sounds okay. You can go up to 120 here. I don't know why the hell you'd want that, but... Yeah, that Q there is very strange. So here I have some basic effects going on with this very basic patch. Maybe I have this going on for a while, have stuff automated. Maybe I have this going down or up or whatever, and I just wanted some effects to create things that are interesting, like maybe a break's going on. I simply put a bunch of effects here and pretty much just automate it while it's going on. You know, make things random and interesting and fun. Say I'm tired of how a saw sounds. Well, we're not in the age where the 303 only has 2 shapes to it. Why don't we do, well, let's try with the square first just to see. That sounds nice, but why don't we go with some spectral sounds? That already sounds kind of cool. Maybe I think that high end sounds a bit too sharp, so why don't I just do this? Cut this frequency off, put some erosion on it, make it sound lo-fi. That's already sounding crazy, and it doesn't really sound anywhere near acid, but you know what? That doesn't even matter. Let's turn this into a bandpass just to see how it goes. Sounds a bit thinner, but I really don't mind that. Maybe you add a bunch of other timbres in it. In fact, why don't I just add a little breakbeat here and see how that sounds? Already sounds great.
Let's talk about different sounds.
Alright, so I have this pretty much basic stab, recorded a chord, bounced it down. Sounds fine, let's make acid with it. And it's really easy here, you can just make an envelope. The only thing with Ableton's filter is it kind of sounds very distinct. It doesn't really sound too acidy, so I might go out and do an external one after this. Let's see. Yeah, it's not really sounding too acid to me, so let's The difference here is that with Serum, I can automate two things at once, so I can put an LFO here, and I can also automate this macro. It's a little bit harder to do in here, since, you know, I'm only working with bandpass, and you can only automate it once, so you'd have to do some very tight finicking, and it sounds pretty cool. Yeah, not really acidy, but it's a good texture, and you can also add it on top of acid. I think that sounds very neat. Kind of sounded like a sound mess, but that leads me on to my next thing. Let's talk about drum fills. So I had just spent a couple minutes making a simple syncopated drum loop. Sounds okay. I do want a lot of filler though, and a good way to have filler without adding a bunch of percussion and also adding bass is just by plugging in acid plucks, and I think that's very interesting because you can also automate a bunch of parameters in here and make things sound very interesting without changing your drums too much. I have a simple patch here, and just to make sure nothing's hitting where it's supposed to be, I'm gonna put it in an instrument rack and just automate the moments where these drums aren't hitting. It's very weird. Yeah, maybe not. Already, that's sounding fucking great. A thing I did was add sub to direct out. I could have had it clashing with everything, but then you can't really hear it that well, so what I can do is saturate it externally. Saturator, you already know. Compander, make sure everything's alright. It's already sounding freaking fat, dude. Some erosion maybe. This is how it sounds alone. Sounds very weird, but with the drums, it just melds together pretty good. Let's talk about some Respace. So I don't know much about Respaces, but I do know that it has to do a lot with motion. So if I just bounce down, here's the sound that I bounce down, which is just a really long acid decay. Let's mess with the loops a bit. Let's make this voice 1 so I don't cause damage. Put it on glide mode, maybe mess around with the times a bit. That already sounds kind of weird. Maybe make this loop time longer. I know this isn't really drum and bass, but this is pretty much fundamentally showing how you can manipulate acid or acid-like sounding things to have motion through Res.
You're bluffing.
It sounds very crazy, but you know what? That's what happens when you play with sound. Maybe this snare's not the best. Let's try this. So weird. Okay. All right. I need to stop playing around. Let's go to the next lesson.
Let's talk
About Hackets.
All right. Now that I've made all these sounds, I pretty much just created a Hacket. Mr. Bill has made a video on Hackets a long time ago, 4 years ago. So go watch his video on that. But simply put, I pretty much just made a macro to switch between all of these effects change. You can see it. Look at dancing right there. It's all going wee wee wee. Pretty much, I'm just gonna automate when each of these play over these drums. All right, so with all that being said, I have made a quick demo showcasing everything I've done so far. I've only been at this for like 2 hours. Acid is something that's simple but complex at the same time, and I love it because of that, because there's no other sound that I like more than acid. It's just, I can't even describe it. It's just the coolest sound to me, and there's millions of ways, there's infinite ways to do pretty much anything with acid from start to finish, and because of that, you don't need any other instrument. So throw all your instruments away, throw that trombone away, throw that piano away. You have a drum kit, just throw it in the trash. Get acid, get a Roland 303, and if you can't get a Roland 303, then just do what I'm doing right now. Hope you guys have a good rest of your day. See you guys next week, I guess.
Bye.